Hey, what's up everyone? Hope you're all having a great day. Today I wanted to answer some questions that I've been getting on my videos regarding my left-handed mouse and keyboard setup. You might assume that the answer is simple. I'm just a left-handed guy who put the mouse on the left-hand side because it's more comfortable. But the story of why I play left-handed is actually a bit more interesting, and in fact, it's not the weirdest part of my control scheme. Left-handed gamers are pretty rare. Left-handed people are rare in general, but in gaming, most lefties learn to play right-handed. Looking online, you can find a few forum posts by people curious about it, but it's so rare that gaming peripheral companies don't even bother making left-handed or ambidextrous mice. The vast majority of professional competitive scenes will have at most one left-handed person, if they have one at all. In the entire history of the competitive Overwatch scene, there's only been one professional player that plays left-handed, Nico GDH. I'm actually not natively left-handed. Like most normal people, I used to use my computer right-handed because that's what you're supposed to do, and because I was right-handed like 90% of the population. When I was younger, I played PC FPS games like Call of Duty, Battlefield, and PlanetSide 2 right-handed just like everybody else. You might be thinking that I must have gotten some kind of terrible hand injury that forced me to play left-handed, but no, thankfully my right hand is just fine and it's not that kind of story. When I was younger, I was quite fascinated in the idea of handedness, and I'd always wondered why so many people were right-handed and so few people were left-handed. I was even more fascinated by the idea of ambidexterity, the skill of being able to do tasks using either hand with equal competency. Growing up, I learned most skills right-handed because that's what everyone else did. But for fun, I decided that I wanted to try achieving ambidexterity, and so I relearned many everyday skills with my left hand. This included basic things like writing and using utensils. One skill that I didn't relearn with my left hand was playing FPS games, and part of the reason for this is because FPS games are actually very hard to get the hang of. I did try it a few times, but the controls felt extremely unnatural. I found myself unable to do basic things like peek corners fluidly, and even just looking in the right direction was difficult. I had already gotten pretty good at FPS with my right hand, and so learning to play left-handed would mean getting destroyed as a noob for a very long time, and so I just gave up. Until a few years ago, during the peak of the COVID pandemic, I decided that I wanted to challenge myself and finally learn to play FPS left-handed. Needless to say, I was just as bad as I expected I would be, but I wanted to commit to the challenge anyway. At the time, Warzone was the game I mainly played, and it took me a very long time before I was even able to get close to winning my first gunfight. And this is part of the reason that I say that mechanics matter a lot, because you don't know how much you need them until they're actually taken away from you. It was at this point that I got curious about aim training. I had already been using aim trainers for a while when I was playing right-handed. A very popular opinion in the FPS community is that aim trainers are useless, and you should just play the game. I had always been particularly skeptical of this advice, especially for beginners. This attitude was even more popular in the Battle Royale community, where very high-level players would advise beginners to simply rush into every gunfight they possibly could in order to learn the game. I thought to myself, wouldn't it be more efficient if you broke down a larger skill into smaller skills and learned them in isolation? In this case, separating strategy from mechanics. Most things in life are intuitively taught like this already, including music, sports, language, etc. Trying to do more than you're capable of usually just leads to learning things inefficiently. Learning to aim well in FPS games certainly isn't impossible by just playing the game, but I did wonder how much using an aim trainer could accelerate the learning process. In fact, I ended up exclusively playing Kovacs for about a year. Warzone became kind of boring, and I wasn't particularly interested in any other FPS games at the time. But I still wanted to see if I could learn to aim left-handed. So about 500 hours of Kovacs later and about 300 hours of Overwatch, I would say I have fairly decent aim. And I don't think my aim would be at the level it is now if I just spent all of the hours only playing Overwatch. I can still play games quite competently with my right hand, although I would be quite rusty since it's been a while. As far as I know, I might be the only person on the internet that can play FPS games ambidextrously. Now, if you're naturally left-handed, would it be better to switch? And the answer is probably not. We don't know enough about human neurology to conclude whether or not handedness is actually related to better motor neuron function on one side of the body. But in my opinion and in my experience, aiming is more about practice than anything else, so if you're naturally left-handed, you're probably not at a disadvantage. So there's probably no reason to switch if you've been aiming right-handed for years, but I do think it's worth a try just to see what it's like. You might be surprised at just how hard FPS games can be. My control scheme playing left-handed is essentially a mirror of my right-handed controls, with some weird modifications that in my opinion make the game more comfortable. For movement, I use PL:''. A lot of left-handed gamers use OKL:'', but I find that that places my hand too far to the right. My reload key is actually one of my side mouse buttons. I'm one of the few people who like using both sides of an ambidextrous mouse, and so I use my ring finger to reload. Most people reload using their index finger on their keyboard with the R key, but if you think about it, this means that you can't move to the right while you're reloading. For jumping and crouching, I use my pinky finger for both. Whether I play right or left-handed, I use the keys above and below the shift key. I use the key above for jumping and the key below for crouching. This made sense to me because you never need to jump and crouch at the same time, so using the same finger for both is not an issue. Since I use a compact keyboard, this would be the left arrow key and the enter key. If I was playing right-handed, this would be the left control key and the caps lock key. When I tell this to people I know, they usually don't have any issues with my crouch key, since that's a relatively standard control scheme for some games. But when I tell them that I use my pinky finger for jumping, it does invoke a bit of a reaction. If you use your pinky finger for jumping, what's your spacebar for? And what I say next is usually considered blasphemy. I use my spacebar as my primary fire button. This sounds extremely strange to most FPS players, but from a practical perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense. Aiming is fundamental to playing FPS games, and being able to aim with a more relaxed hand actually feels much better than needing to hold down my finger while I'm aiming. I also use toggle ADS in my settings. That's the setting where you click the mouse to ADS rather than needing to hold it down. So when I'm aiming, which is basically 90% of the time in-game, the only pressure I have on the mouse is from my grip. For abilities, I do use Shift for one of them, but I don't use the equivalent of Q and E. Instead, I use mouse 1, which is the index finger on your mouse hand, and the side button for Alt. My secondary fire is on the standard mouse 2 key, and the melee key is the Alt key, which I use my thumb to press. And that's basically my entire control scheme. With this control scheme, not only am I able to keep my aiming hand relaxed, it also means that I never need to take my fingers off of my movement keys. Let me know in the comment section if you have any weird non-standard controls as well. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and leaving a like and comment to support the channel. That's all I have to say for now. I hope you have a wonderful day.